Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. Today we're going to have a conversation that goes all across the board, but there is one common theme, which is the fact that there are a lot of aspects to our reality, to our universe, that official agencies do not acknowledge because it behooves them to do so, and it behooves them to keep you in the dark, out of the know, out of the light of the truth. This is what I believe, but I'm going to show you a whole bunch of data, correlations, connections, examples for you to then think about and process, okay? So everyone has their own thoughts, ideas, beliefs, opinions, whatever. We all got them, but data is data. And that's what we're going to primarily be looking at in today's video. And this involves the latest update on Interstellar Object 3I Atlas because for whatever reason, this seems to have been one of the critical factors in awakening a lot of people around the world. Because if you've been tracking this story, it just doesn't add up. Doesn't mean that it's, a million aliens aboard that were going to invade our planet. That didn't happen, right? It's continuing to fly from outside the solar system, through our solar system, and it's continuing on. It has there's no data suggesting that it's going to turn around or anything like that. And if that was to be the case, it would require a tremendous amount of energy, all these things. So it appears to be a unique interstellar object, which is what I've said from day one. But the official stance from NASA is that it's a comet. And if you watch their press conference back in October, they spent the first 5-10 minutes literally just saying comet, 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 comet over and over and over. It was strangely, it was like bizarre. It was very strange. They thought that if they said it more and more, that it was going to make it true. And it has a lot of similar behaviors to comets from our solar system, but it's also quite a bit different. And space is a very vast, open, unexplored area. We don't know all the nuances of things outside of our solar system. We've only barely sampled interstellar space in situ with Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. So comets typically are these like fluffy aggregates of water ice and also, for example, like methane ice, CO2 ice, these compounds that have a very low density, and they're not, because of their low density and size, they don't have much gravity. So when they come into the solar system, the solar radiation is able to volatilize a lot of those ices directly into gas, which then gets plasmified in space or ionized. But also a lot of it can shed off. And then there's sometimes a little bit of other materials, metals, minerals, iron, nickel, whatever, dust grain, silica, etc. But in general, they're these fluffy aggregates of ice. That's the typical definition of a comet. Who's to say that you can't have an interstellar object that's actually a remnant piece of an exploded planet that would have a much higher bulk density? Maybe it's magnetized, right? Perhaps it's even a chunk of, let's say, like some extrastellar material. Like we don't know. It's basically completely up in the air. And we had a chance, an opportunity to send the probe orbiting around Jupiter called Juno to intercept 3I Atlas, and they didn't do so. Now, that would be understandable if Juno had another 10 years of its mission of collecting data around Jupiter. Its mission ran out in September 2025. Then we had the shutdown. I haven't been able to find any information as it relates to new updates on the Juno probe. Maybe someone else does. I didn't look for like 5 hours or anything, but effectively it's been radio silent on the Juno probe. Whereas if we had picked it up and recalibrated and launched it as best we could to the expected orbit of 3I Atlas, we would have at least gone closer than just burning it up into the atmosphere of Jupiter. They said it didn't have enough fuel, but the thing is, with good photo observations of 3I Atlas, we could really get a better understanding of what it is. The closer you get, the better that's going to be. So here's another thing, is that when it was first detected, 3i Atlas, back July 1st, we had some Hubble imagery that was taken quickly afterwards. And then there was this long lull period where Hubble never looked at it. James Webb only really looked at it once during this time frame as well, before perihelion, October 29th. We had the shutdown in October before perihelion. All of a sudden, the government shut down for more than a month. NASA's, supposedly not doing anything, though they were doing all of these social media posts and everything, but they weren't giving us the up-to-date imagery on 3i Atlas. That was bizarre. Now, Hubble is taking a bunch of up-to-date photos of 3i Atlas. It's like every single week now. So they've increased their frequency of observation of interstellar object 3i Atlas, and rightly so. I'm glad that they've done that because it allows us to get some good information across time. But why weren't they doing that before? That early observational data is also very important. This is the third ever interstellar object observed, the fastest by far, 2 times faster than 2i Borisov, which was roughly 32 kilometers per second, which was faster than Oumuamua, the first one in 2017. We should be looking at this thing. So I processed the data from yesterday. Yesterday was a very special day as it relates to 3i Atlas. We can see that right here because we had a very rare opposition alignment with 3i Atlas, where you have the Sun, the Earth, and 3i Atlas in a line, and the deviation off of that was only 0.69 degrees. So incredibly low deviation. So low that we've only seen that with one other comet, at least according to Avi Loeb. He wrote a blog post, I don't know, today, a few days ago, whatever, saying that there's one other comet that had such an alignment. And that allows us to look at it from a unique perspective. Let me show you the alignment here. But this is much more than 3i Atlas because, they're not really telling us everything about this thing clearly, or at least they're not wanting to acknowledge the fact that it's different than their playbook. But we also see that with space weather. We had this historic planetary alignment, as I've been talking about for more than a year now, right? Going from early January to right about now. It's starting to break apart, but still very active, as you can see. This is set for today, 23rd of January. Here's that alignment. So we've been talking about this for like a year, saying we're going to have something big come. We had a gigantic solar storm hit us just a few days ago. We had a very long duration G4 to G5 minus geomagnetic storm, and it would have been the strongest solar storm at least since 1989 if the magnetic field configuration was negative instead of positive, because the magnetic field shock was tremendously strong, 90 nanotesla. Normally it's like for a strong solar storm impact, like an extreme to severe to extreme, it's like 40 or 50 nanotesla. That's like a huge solar storm impact. This was 90. There's some estimates that that was comparable to the Carrington event in terms of its magnetic field strength. Velocity was less than Carrington because this transit time from Sun to Earth was about 30 hours. Carrington was about 16 hours maximum. I think it was right around that 16-hour range. So the Carrington event came in very fast. It came in very strong with this magnetic field. And it's also assumed that it came in with a negative polarity connecting to Earth's field. This one was not as fast, but it did come in with a very strong magnetic field, and it came in with a positive magnetic field. If it had been negative, it almost undoubtedly, certainly, absolutely guarantee would have been the strongest storm at least since 1989 with Quebec when they had power grid outages. Something just interesting, I just gotta say this. All these people that are like aurora hunters, they like go out for photos of the northern lights. I get it. To see the northern lights must be incredible, right? Overhead pulsing, whatever. Like when I saw them with the last storm, it was pretty cool and it wasn't that great of a display. But with a storm that big, you shouldn't be hoping for it to have a good connection. There's people online lamenting over the fact that it didn't, like we didn't have a negative 60 BZ. I'm like, guys, we would have had like huge technological outages, cellular networks, GPS, satellites, maybe power grids start going down. Like with a storm that size, we don't know what could have happened. Right now, the United States, we had this like big, super cold front moving through, right? There's a lot of areas that have stressed power grids. It's going to have a lot of snow dump really quick. We're actually having volatile weather all across the globe right now. Hint, it's because of the space weather. That's another one of these things that NASA is not talking about, the connection between space weather and terrestrial weather. Okay, that's also NOAA. All these organizations, there's these very obvious things that they don't discuss that they know about. Like, if they aren't knowledgeable about them to some degree, then that just blows my mind, because they are sending these, they're doing these complicated rocket trajectories out into space, and they have all these research papers written across the decades talking about these subjects from a variety of like more independent NASA researchers. But the official perspective on this is that, oh, space weather doesn't connect to terrestrial weather. The planets don't influence solar activity, right? The planets don't influence consciousness or any of this stuff. So there is a lot that's being hidden that is not being addressed, and that's what we're going to get into in today's video. So here's the alignment for today for 3i Atlas, and as you see, it's in that full moon position where it's on the other side of the Earth, and that means that it's going to be very, very bright. It's about 2.36 astronomical units away from the Earth at this moment in time. But also there's been this whole saga about there being a sunward facing tail slash jet, and that is, highly anomalous or bizarre. And well, today, and well, more precisely yesterday, because again, I can show you this, more precisely yesterday is when we had the least amount of deviation with the oppositional line being only 0.69 degrees. And we're in this zone here where it's below 2 degrees right now, going all the way till about the end of January, about, let's say, the 27th of January. So today, yesterday, tomorrow, we're all basically, are all very much closely aligned with this opposition vector between the Sun, Earth, and 3i Atlas. So I processed the data for 3i Atlas for yesterday, dropped by Hubble, because again, they've been releasing more and more data sets for 3i Atlas. They dropped 6 different images. They had the raw images, and then they had these CTE corrected images, and then flat fielded and drizzle, and like there's all these weird acronyms and terms and things that they do. I basically took the final calibrated images from Hubble, which corrects for some of these sensor malfunctions over time and some of this drift and everything. Without getting into it, I took those 6 images, I processed them, I stacked them, and this is a false color composite, meaning that I took the black and white imagery of 3i Atlas, which I can show you really quick, because it comes in grayscale. The raw data just comes in black and white. I took the black and white data and added some color to it so we could better understand what we're looking at. But here is effectively, and then I also rotated into position. I did all the things. It took quite some time. First time doing it, but I think I did it pretty good, but I can't guarantee that there are no errors with this. So just in general, keep that in mind. But it was a pretty, I'm very diligent with these things. So this is the raw imagery. This shows the coma, and then this is with the rotational gradient filter applied to it, so we can better see these jets coming off of it. And if we go back, those are here in white and also in red. So, part of that is a deficiency. The other part is where it's more activated. And so the brightness, for example, if we do go back, this is where the jet is, where it's bright, okay? Because we're looking at bright pixels here. So so these would be the jets right here. And then we see the coma extending out like this. This is a sunward direction. Technically, that vector is 0.69 degrees, but in reality, it's actually going straight out to you, the viewer, you right there. Yeah, hello and welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Stefan Burns. If you are new here, we cover what's happening with the Earth energetically. We also look at what's happening with our star, the Sun, solar activity, planetary resonances, space weather, interstellar and cosmic forces. But we also talk about a lot of the forces here on Earth. And for example, we're going to be talking about the price of silver today, because that's connected, believe it or not, to a whole bunch of unique planetary energies. And we're having right now the price of silver go crazy, just hit $100 per ounce. And this is another one of those things that those in power don't want you to know, that you can use the planets to better understand what's going to kind of roll out in the future and to be prepared, because they would rather have you poor and destitute than, abundant and empowered. So a lot to talk about today. But effectively, because of this oppositional alignment with 3i Atlas today, if that sunward facing tail, exists, it should be pointing at us directly like this, because it's sunward facing, and right now the sun's directly behind us. What we see is that we still have it off to the side, whatever this thing is. If we look at this data from the 7th of January, this time processed by Tony Scarmato, he's been processing all this Hubble data. That's another thing. They're obligated to release this data because that's just any public organization for the United States has to release their data, but they don't always do that. I worked on a project for the USGS, the East Space Seismic Project, and I was interested in looking at that data, and that never got released as far as I know. Maybe like the final product, but they're supposed to release the raw data and everything, but they kept that like under wraps for a while. And that was about the Hayward Fault and more. I don't know why they would. It's probably just, a lot of work on their desk. But I was waiting years to get my hands on it because I helped volunteer for that, and I thought that was cool. I wanted to see it. Anyways, they do release all the data as they take it with Hubble, but they haven't been processing it. But it's there, so we can process it. So Tony's been processing a lot of this. Here we see it on the 7th. If we go back to the 22nd now, so this is before we had this oppositional alignment. We go back here, looks effectively the same. I layered in the jet, so this is a dual composite image, but we see that hasn't disappeared like you would expect it to. Because at this moment in time, if you have an anti-sunward tail that's being pushed by the sun directly behind 3i Atlas in the direction of its movement, effectively, not 100%, but right now kind of, and then a sunward facing thing, you should just see a circle, but we don't. So this is showing that it's not just, it's not this sunward facing tail that we've been told about. It's actually probably an anti-velocity tail. So it's some material that's moving off of interstellar object 3i Atlas in the opposite direction of its travel. Let's look again at the sky live. So here's the sky live. And again, this is set for today, but let's go back now to the 7th of January, which is when we had that for that other image by Tony. And you see here that it's similar, right? It's a similar direction there, but it's not oppositional. We're looking at it more from the side. And so if there was sunward facing, you would expect it to be more off and angled to the side on the 7th as compared to now. But if again, we look at it right now, we see that effectively it looks almost exactly the same. But now it should be directly behind us. So what this is telling us, if we go forward here to 23rd, this is our best idea, okay? We've had a lot of realizations across time with 3i Atlas, but if you look at its direction of travel, it's going like this. This is the sunward vector. This is its velocity vector, both anti and then also going forward. That's the direction it's aligned up with. It's sometimes hard to get an understanding or a view because of the perspective and the shifts, but because we're still seeing it go off to the east with the astronomical coordinate system, this is showing that it's some material that's being left behind as 3i Atlas travels forward like this. And we've been talking about how in just about 6 weeks or so, Earth is going to be moving into the remnant dust plume, I guess you could call it, left by 3i Atlas in October. Because we see, if we go all the way back here, here is September, end of September. This is roughly the perihelion. It's actually almost also the exact opposition there. Which was the superior conjunction of 3i Atlas. That was around the 21st of October. But it moved through this whole zone here, as you can see, in October and November. And now we are moving into that in February, but really strongly in March. And that's going to be when it hits Jupiter. Why isn't NASA talking about that? You think that would be pretty important to know. There is evidence from the past that when we moved into the plume or tail of a comet, that it can cause some serious problems here on Earth. I'll have to link this in the video description when the video is done, but there's a good article on SSGEOS by Frank Hugerbeets on some dynamics about that relating to comets, and how the official story is that these three comets are different comets, but he calculated the orbital periods, and we passed through the tail of one, and right around that time frame is when we had the Black Death like roll through Europe. So, you know, there's just so many things that for some reason they don't want to address. So, like, they don't want to maybe freak us out. Well, it's like the truth, we should be able to prepare for this stuff as things are happening. Doesn't mean that everyone's clueless just because, you know, a large organization which may be in the know isn't telling the public. Some of us can figure it out and, you know, tell others, but it doesn't help that official organizations. It's like the food pyramid. They're like, you know, put the least healthy foods at the top and eat the most of them, and then they want to eat the least amount of healthy food. So it's all backwards, folks. So that's the latest on 3i Atlas. This data processing shows that this is not a sunward facing tail. And we're kind of coming to some conclusions around this. I made a video recently talking about how I think 3i Atlas may be spinning faster than about 16 hours or so, which was the original spin estimate for 3i Atlas based off of pre-perihelion data. And that was because of these jets in general. In an astrophysical environment, to create jets, you need a magnetized central rotating body, and that can produce these tightly collimated jets going out. Then Avi Loeb came out with a paper recently, along with Tony Scarmato. The two of them worked together, and they calculated a new rotation period of about 7 hours or so. Again, I don't know if that number is right or wrong. I think it's difficult to get these numbers based off of the fact that this coma is so opaque. We really can't see the nucleus, but we know that asteroids have been measured now with a spin period of less than 2 minutes. And it's easy to measure that for an asteroid because it doesn't have a coma, right? It's just an asteroid. Why don't they talk about plasma in space? It's always gas and dust, right? They're never talking about plasma. There's all these things. There's so many oddities. So it just kind of gets bizarre. Now, if we go back to today, roughly, but let's actually go back about a week before today, here to the planetary alignment. Okay, here's our planetary alignment. And let me reset the camera. Okay, again, we've been talking about this for a long time, about how we're going to get all the planets to align. Venus, Mars, Mercury, Earth, Jupiter, 3i Atlas is in there. Pluto's in there as well, right? There's Pluto in this alignment as well. Well, we just had this historic solar storm. So let's check out the coronagraph for that. Here is the coronagraph imagery for the past 7 days. And we see all the planets here. We have Mercury moving in quickly, superior conjunction. There's Mars, there's Venus, okay? At the beginning, you'll see this big coronal mass ejection right there. All that particle snow, that's the high energy relativistic ions hitting the sensor. That triggered an S4 proton radiation storm on Earth. That is high energy particles like protons and alpha particles and electrons hitting Earth and charging up the atmosphere. And in general, after big geomagnetic storms and these sort of radiation storms, any sort of space weather that's significant, it makes the weather more volatile. So no surprise that we're seeing more volatile weather right now, not just in the United States and Russia and other places around the globe, but everywhere. Like, it's just overall making weather more volatile because the global electric circuit is charged up, okay? So that occurred, S4 proton radiation storm, the strongest since 2003. And if that had been more Earth direct, it probably would have been a record-breaking radiation storm because we didn't get hit by the full brunt of it. It went to the east solar coordinate system just by a little bit, but if it had launched off a day later, it probably would have been an S5 storm, which has never actually been observed. Okay, so this is the coronagraph for the past week with the planets. We're talking about how this could happen, and I have a direct corollary here because here we have the coronagraph going back to 2006 with the last time we had a very similar sequence to this, also Mars, Venus, Earth synodic cycle. But this time we have Mars going on the inside and Jupiter on the outside, whereas it's the opposite for this time. But we will see how, and also they don't talk about how comets affect the sun when they impact, but we'll see this solar activity start to build. And then right at the end, once these sunspots rotate past the limb, you'll see the first big explosions right here coming up. Boom, boom, we have some activity just like we had. And then it goes here, Earth direct, and then we get these solar explosions. There's the first one. And then the second one follows up right behind just a few days later. Boom, there it is. Okay, so we've been talking about that for months because I went and looked at the planetary geometry and I was like, when was the last time we had geometry like this? It's like, oh, it was 2006. Let me see what the space weather was like. Oh, we had 2 G4 storms back to back right after the sequence occurred. Let's look at the chronograph imagery. Oh, wow, look at that, right? And well, this is what happened. We have the chronograph imagery now for this time frame. The future has happened. It's now the past. And that's exactly what occurred. We've had this data. We don't need more and more data at this point. It's going to help, certainly, but we've known this for a while. This hasn't been a secret. So why hasn't it been acknowledged officially that planetary geometry affects solar activity? Because if the goal of NOAA is to forecast space weather, why aren't they using that in their forecasts? Instead, there's no official communication that this exists. If you talk about it online, a lot of people say that you're a complete wacko or nutso or you're a pseudoscientist. Meanwhile, a year in advance, we were talking about this possibility being a distinct high probability, and it happened. Again, if it had been a negative polarity to that solar storm, it would have been very likely the strongest since 1989. I think it would have been stronger, but who knows? We don't know. We would have had to write it out and literally see. So they don't talk about that. This research goes back a long time. There's other people talking about it. We can go here, just do a simple Google search, or this isn't even Google, it's like DuckDuckGo. But this just, do the planets affect solar activity, NASA? And we have researchers of Helmholtz-Zentrum. This is in Germany. They developed a model suggesting the planets in the solar system, particularly Venus, Earth, and Jupiter, the ones that we've been talking about, may influence the sun's magnetic activity through their combined tidal forces. Really good research out there. We have this paper that was published by someone at NASA Glenn Research Center, Cleveland in 2007 talking about this. We had J.H. Nelson going back to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, when we didn't even know about most of what we know now about space, right? We didn't have Sputnik up there until, what, 57 or something? He was doing accurate forecasts of radio disturbances based off of sunspots and planetary geometry in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s. The guy's a legend if you read about him, cosmic patterns. But there's no section here. It's like, hey, here's what we know. It operates on these cycles. It's radio silence. Meanwhile, there are not just like $100,000 or $1 million. There's like billions of dollars or trillions of dollars, perhaps, of infrastructure. Probably trillions, considering all the spy satellites and all the critical satellites that various government organizations operate. Trillions of critical infrastructure at risk, yet they don't talk about it. And maybe that's why. But that's something else. So if the planets can affect solar activity like that, can they also affect us? That is another good question. Let us look at something now, and you'll see what I'm getting to. But here is the price of silver. And I've been talking about this for a while. I made a video not that long ago, honestly, on the price of silver and the astrology of it, how there's certain astronomical alignments that occur with key points in time for silver. And we'll do a quick refresher. I've talked about that, but that was roughly here, price was, I don't know, $50, $60 something. It just broke $100 today. We're at $103 right now. So just to give you a sense of scale, we're going to talk about the history of Rome a little bit too. So buckle up, folks. But this quarter right here, 1944, you're not going to be able to see it that well, but this is a silver quarter. It's junk silver. So it's 90% silver. This is from 1944. The last silver quarters and coins go up to 1964. I think there was like also maybe in 1965, they used a little bit of silver and then they completely discontinued it. But 1944, this is 90% silver. This has a face value of 25 cents, right? And we'll say this is a 64 quarter for the purpose of that's the last moment that it had that content. This is now worth nearly $20 because there's about just a little bit less than 0.2 ounces of silver in here. And with the price at $100, that makes it really simple. This is about $20 now. So going from 25 cents to $20, this is now worth 80 times more money than it was when it was first printed. We look at this. This one is from 1964. This silver, what, $half? Yeah, this silver $half. We just cleaned it up today. Looks really nice. This is even more. I mean, the weight is probably maybe half an ounce on this, or 0.4 ounces, something like that. Buffalo nickel here, right? That's also, again, 0.9 or 90% silver. And then this bar here, you know, the price of silver, let's go back a little bit in time. I'm just laying out the recent price history, okay? So if you're wondering, like, what's this all about? Well, just have some patience. And you guys do. You guys are awesome. So I love you all for that. But if we go back here, we see that the price of silver in 93 all the way through .com, the turn of the millennium, $5. This is 10 ounces right here. This used to cost $50. This is now $1,000. So again, that 20x increase. So this bar right here is now $1,000. Used to be able to pick it up for $50. Pretty wild stuff. So what's the point of mentioning all this? Okay, well, we talked about how planetary alignments seem to influence solar activity. They also seem to have an influence over more mundane aspects of reality. Here we see our chart for silver. Let's change it to maybe 3 months to get a higher resolution look at this. We can kind of zoom out like this. All right. Right now in the sky, in the night sky, we have Saturn and Neptune going conjunct. And we can pull that up really quick. I want to show you this conjunction specifically so you can see what I'm talking about with our solar system viewer here. And if we zoom over, there we have Saturn and Neptune, okay? So they are about to do a great conjunction, a once every 35 to 37 year cycle. And that will specifically be right around February 20th or so. It's like the 21st, I think. It's right in that zone. It's like within a couple of days of that date, okay? We nearly had that great conjunction back in July. This is also interesting because we found 3i Atlas in July. So they nearly would conjunct July 15th. So there's these connections across time as well, which are interesting, and across different things. We're talking about 3i Atlas. How is this related? Well, this seems to be connected to it. Neptune archetypally represents the expansive and the imagination and all possibilities, and Saturn is this solidifying influence. So Neptune applying to Saturn will dissolve structures, but Saturn applying to Neptune will manifest things into reality, and they may be kind of wild, right? Like interstellar in nature, for example. We have this interstellar object flying through. So this is happening also in a very specific part of the sky, right? We see that this is happening in Pisces right here. And if we were to, I think I dragged the wrong way. If we were to use Western tropical, this would actually be right around 0 degrees of Aries. But either way, this is the location in the sky for right now, effectively, okay? And what we have coming up at the middle to end of February is that exact conjunction. Well, this is what's happening with the price of silver right now. It's just going totally bonkers, right? And it really got activated. If we zoom in here, this is our 3-month graph. Let's move to a 1-month graph so we can really see this, okay? If you look here, this month right there is, let me get it back on there. That month right there is June. Boom. So right as Saturn and Neptune get close to the conjunction in that part of the night sky, silver starts to go nuts, okay? That's one data point. Big whoop. Let's look at some other data points because that's important. Here we have 2011, 2010. So we can zoom in and we see that we had this spike there, April of 2011. And then we see this goes back to August of 2010 right there where it started to move higher. Let's look back at our planets. And again, remember, it's like just to the left of the head of the fishes, okay? Let's go back to 2010 now. And let's see what was happening there. So we can zoom forward. And here we are, right there, June of 2010, we have a Jupiter-Uranus alignment in the exact same part of the sky, within 2 degrees of what's happening in February and what nearly occurred in July of last year, 2025. This occurred exactly then, Jupiter and Uranus. If we go back, again, we see that this was really kicking off starting in, really started going in August. That's June right there. So right after that occurred, straight to the moon, baby. Okay, we got 2 data points. Cool story, bro. Well, let's check out this one right here. Here we have the Hunt brothers. They cornered the silver market. Did not work, but we see here 79 going up to 80 and then going back down here. If we go back to our planetary geometry, we can go back to 1980. Or yeah, 1980, but we're actually going to have to go back slightly before 1980. But we'll start at 1980 because we had a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. This is a great conjunction. Every 20 years, Jupiter and Saturn meet in the night sky. They did that at the very end of December 1980. So again, if I move over, you'll see here, let me just go to this side. We see here that they met up there December, I think it was actually December 31st, they had their first conjunction. They had 3, it's a triple conjunction. You see it's in Virgo. What's opposite Virgo? It is the fishes. And so we see that they had this conjunction roughly here in Pisces. So that's interesting because, and Saturn seems to be a key player here. This goes back all the way to 211 BC. Because if we go back to our price graph, let me show you the price graph. That was the end of 1980. So it was, we had that real kickoff between, we had that great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn right here at the end of the cycle. But they met up a little bit further into Libra. It wasn't exactly like 0 or 1 degrees of Libra, Western tropical, or, you know, that's the equivalent value in Virgo for true sky. They did it a little bit further. So it was before that moment that they were passing over those earlier degrees, which are oppositional to the ones right now, if that makes sense. Because you can split the sky in 36 degrees. And so if we go back, and this app is starting to bug out a little bit. So let me close out this app really quick. And reload it. It starts to, when I live stream, it bugs out after a certain amount of time. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's my mouse. It's still a little slow. Yeah, that's better for now. So we'll go back to 1980. Right here. Still slow. That's fine though. And maybe it's best I set up over here. And there's Saturn and Neptune, okay? And you see that in this before period, that's more oppositional in a line with that exact point in Pisces. So that also was occurring just on the other side of the sky of that specific energy point around the big run-up in the 1980s specifically. So we have 1, 2, 3 points where there's this alignment in the sky, and we had significant activity with big planetary cycles. This isn't like a small Venus, Mars thing, whatever. This is the big boys, the gas giants, Saturn, Neptune right now, Uranus, Jupiter in 2010, and then Jupiter, Saturn in 1979, 1980. That time frame right there. Let me pull up the graph of the denarius. I think I should be able to find this pretty easy. The minting of the denarius in 211 BC. Check this out. This is pretty cool. So we'll go here. And so here we have a Western tropical astrology chart for the minting of denarius. And what I want to show you is just really one key thing. I went to look at the history of silver because I wanted to better understand it. So once you have this understanding that the planets affect things, you can do some research. I was like, okay, well, if we want to understand the history of silver, because I had this hunch that silver was going to do well, then I should look at really the first, really solid use of silver, or at least a really big momentous moment in time for silver, which was the minting of the first real silver coins in 211 BC by the Roman Republic. So we don't have the exact date for that, unfortunately. Ideally you have the exact date, the exact time, but I loaded up that time frame, 211, and I found that we had this Saturn Uranus opposition that year. And in fact, they went exact at 1 degree of Aries, which is right now this opposition or this conjunction between Saturn and Neptune and Aries is occurring at 0 degrees. So within 1 degree of what's happening now, the minting of the denarius occurred. So I took that to be the chart of the minting of the denarius. Effectively, when the first silver coins were struck, we had this activation in the sky. Saturn and Uranus moved quite slowly, so this was very much active. May not, the first stamp may not have happened literally exactly at this minute on this day, but that was a super strong influence at that time, showing that there's this connection between silver and these very key points in our solar system, these specific angle directions, whatever. Don't ask me like how that makes sense. My best understanding and explanation is that it's like a morphic resonance of energy, information, consciousness to the solar system. There's memories and imprints and information at key points, and when these archetypal energies move over them, they activate them, they trigger certain themes to occur and certain kind of events to unfold here on Earth. But we don't have like a hard science explanation for this. It's probably why these organizations don't want to talk about this, because they want to stick to science, which is very malleable. People think science is hard and fast. Look at all the fake research papers that are coming out all the time. Now they're being written by AI as well, being submitted. They just get like auto-stamped, approved, right? While it requires more of an open right brain, you have to kind of open up your senses to understand this stuff because it's not so logical and precise. That's actually, when you're dissecting things down, you're losing the holism of reality, what actually exists. So, you can't, in that way, science is very malleable and you can manipulate it easily because you can take these very thin dissections and present that and then hide all the rest around it and then, plead ignorant or whatever. But if you know this stuff, you know that there's an effect here. So here's the minting of the denarius. That's a pretty big moment. And we also had a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And where do we have that? Saturn and Neptune conjunction right here at 2 degrees in 594 BC, which is when we roughly had the first coins really be introduced. These are coins made out of electrum, which is a gold-silver mix, and that really started up around 600 BC. So as you go further back, the time horizons get a little shakier, but they do line up as well. That was an important moment. You can go even further back. There's historical use of the shekel, and shekels were typically just kind of struck out of silver. They didn't have really clear organization to them, but it was a unit of account going back 2000 BC, 2500 BC. They talk about in the Bible. We really don't know how old the oldest shekels were. And there was a significant Saturn-Neptune conjunction also way back in time about, I think it's like 4,356 BC. That date's not going to be right. I may have written it down in my notepad here. I just don't know on what page and exactly when. But regardless, in the year 4000 something BC, we had also that exact alignment as well. So there's this connection across time with silver and specific alignments of planets at very specific degrees in the solar system. So the reason why I'm highlighting that is just to show you, right, if you go back to this, that if you knew that, it could have been very profitable for you. It probably still will be. I'm not a financial advisor, so just you have to do all your own research, whatever. But this is like a 50-year pattern, a 50-year formation that was made. This is signaling really the start of something completely new. And that's the astrology associated with this at 0 degrees of Aries, if you use Western Tropical, is that this is the birth of a whole new system. So let's talk a little bit about Rome once more, because here we see the fineness of early Roman imperial silver coins. The denarius back in 211 BC, it had an average silver content of 95 to 98%. And that stayed about the same, 95 to 98%, going all the way to about 64 to 68 AD, when all of a sudden it went down to 93.5%. At that moment in time, there were some massive revolts with the army. Emperors were beheaded. They re-raised the weight of it, but the empire was starting to get, thin, and they had all these wars and expansion, everything. So they needed their silver to stretch a little further. So they started to debase it. Back then, they debased their coins by just putting less silver in them. So you can see how it slid down here, and there were some attempts to restore it back up, but they were short-lived. Eventually, it went down to 50%, and then in 241 AD, it was at 48%, and 274 AD, it was 5%. So over the course of about 500 years, nearly 500 years, the denarius went from a silver content of, let's say 97%, because that's roughly in the middle of 95 to 98. From 211 BC, from 97% to 274 AD, 5%. Huge difference, okay? That was the Roman Empire. One of the longest lived empires, republic and then empire, one of the longest lived civilizations on Earth, tremendously impactful from a historical perspective. The legacy of Rome still lives to this day and imprints on us. And we're doing the same thing, not we, but governments and more are doing the same thing now as they did 2,000 years ago in debasing. But look at how the empire collapsed, and as they did that, they had to debase more and more, and they weren't able to keep up. And one important factor to mention here is weather, right? Weather is key. Climate is key. There was a warm period during the Roman Republic, and it transitioned into a cool period later on, and that helped to lead to the collapse. So climate is absolutely key. And then during the medieval warm period, Charlemagne came back and brought back silver coins with the same weight percentage as the early denarius in the BC range. So that was during the medieval warm period. The debasement of currency right now is so much faster than what occurred back then, because again, 62 years ago, 1964, these silver coins here were 90% silver, and they had a face value of 25 cents. And now 64 years later, that quarter that I showed you is worth $20. They've gone down. The dollar has gone down 80 times in relation to the price of silver. The price of silver has gone up 80 times in comparison. This is real money. So this actually hasn't changed in value. It's only changed in price. There is a difference between value and price. So that's much faster. And if we're talking about empires here, right? The United States right now is at a critical moment with not only roughly their Pluto return, we're still well within that time period. We also have Neptune in the same position it was during the Civil War, right at the beginning of the Civil War. It's where it's moving in right now. And we also have Uranus at the same position in the sky as it was during World War II, the Civil War, and the American Revolution. So these forces, they have to play out. We saw how this affected and brought about, was a strong, really important factor in bringing about the collapse of Rome. When they did those first debasements, it like caused like, you know, the first emperor to he actually committed suicide, and then like 2 or 3 other emperors, you know, they lost their head or committed suicide because the soldiers were like, you're cutting our pay effectively, right? And at times they debased the denarius, but then gave them more coins to kind of make up for it. But what's happening right now is on not just a soldier scale, it's like everyone is having this happen to them effectively because it's the global reserve currency, the US dollar. So if you were to learn about the planets, right, and see how they can affect things like, you know, society and in this instance, true money and more, you can be better prepared, aware, and all this stuff. But, you know, they don't want you to know that. And if they acknowledge that the planets have an effect over solar activity, right, as we can very nicely see here with this chronograph imagery for the past week, right, then you start to have to acknowledge that the planets can have an influence over a lot of other things too. If these tiny little planets can have an influence over the sun, which is 99.86% of the mass of the solar system, by God, they got to influence Earth and everything that's happening here energetically, right? Same thing happened in 2006, almost identical, except Mercury and Jupiter effectively swapped places in terms of which side of the sun they were on. But we see the dramatic growth in sunspots. This is almost at the very end of a solar cycle. Yet we had 2 big solar storms launch off right around that moment in time. I mean, another thing that we can cover too, let me just quickly mention this as well, because this is important. This is foundational, okay? So let me mention this. This is really, this kind of drives the whole thing home. Boom, there we go. They're still talking right now about how the solar system formed from a protoplanetary disk, and that's what we think. If we zoom out, you know, there was some bunch of interstellar material that started to coalesce, but the current most accepted model for this is the Laplacian model, and that's pretty old. It goes back quite some time, and there has been a tremendous amount of science showing that it just simply doesn't make sense. Yet that's still the primary model that's given for how the solar system formed. Literally the foundation of our solar system, they say just a gravitational collapse of gas and dust, but let's not talk about plasma at all, right? And of course, as something falls in and it loses potential energy, it releases thermal energy, kinetic energy, right? It's going to heat up, it's going to ionize, it's going to become plasma. Our sun is plasma, yet somehow it only was gas and dust until it immediately started or something. It doesn't make sense. So they talk about the formation of the solar system from a gas and dust perspective and from this Laplacian model, but it really doesn't, it doesn't answer a lot of questions. I mean, some of the critics of it, James Clerk Maxwell, the guy who invented, you thought of the theorems effectively of electromagnetism, you know, Maxwell's equations. Also Hans Alvin. So let me talk about that. Hans Alvin has this book here, Evolution of the Solar System. Guess what? National Aeronautics and Space Administration, 1984, I think this book was published. Let me see. Hans Alvin's born in 1908. This says 1976 on the cover, but I think it may actually be like 1980 something. Either way, right back in the late 70s and early 80s, you know, they were publishing good ideas and everything. I mean, this is a beast of a book right here, right? Well, if you learn a little bit about the gravitational collapse of a dust cloud, you realize that there are a lot of nuances to it. Because gas is pretty distributed, it doesn't have much density. So, for example, you have Jupiter and then you have Saturn. Jupiter's at 5 astronomical units. Saturn is at 10 astronomical units. How do you get the gas in between Jupiter and Saturn to accrete to one of the gas giants, when initially the gravitational field would only extend out 0.5% of the way? That's still the case, right? You need to have a different model of accretion than just gravitational, because you wouldn't be able to get the gravitational collapse of gas and dust across the distances necessary to even form the planets. And they don't talk about the satellites at all when it comes to this model. They only talk about the sun and the planets, and they have this whole thing where the gas giants were formed in closer to the sun, but somehow they migrated out. There's this great migration. They have all these like extra ideas that they've bolted on, like pin the tail on the donkey, but like the pinata is about to burst. No one wants to tell you that. But what we see with the solar system is that there is this distributed density across the solar system. It's not a uniform density. This model keeps it that it's completely homogeneous, and that there's no variation in this disk. But if we look at the solar system, the density, if you were to take the planets, let's say Earth, and distribute its density out across its orbit, the distributed density of the inner planets is about the same. And then you go to the asteroid belt and there's a steep drop off in the distributed density. And then you go out to the outer gas giants and all of a sudden it goes back up, and it's roughly similar to the distributed density of the inner solar system. So there's clearly a non-homogeneous structure to the solar system. That's also just true simply if you look at, right, the fact that you have Jupiter and then a big gap, and then Saturn, and then a bigger gap to Uranus, right? Jupiter's 5, Saturn's 10, Uranus is 20, Neptune's 30. So you start to get these jumps. How does that gas accrete when you need a certain amount of planetary size to accrete it in the first place? Helium and hydrogen don't like to stay bound to a planet. There's a reason why helium on Earth just flies straight out to the atmosphere, or hydrogen too flies straight out. We don't have enough gravity to hold on to it. You need like 5 to 10 Earth masses to start to hold on to helium and hydrogen. How do you get to that size initially with just the collapse of a dust cloud and a gas cloud? You don't. You need plasma. The moment you have plasma, the fourth state of matter, which has a charge to it, it obeys electromagnetism instead of gravity. Electromagnetism being such a stronger force than gravity, 10 to 36 times more powerful than gravity. Once you have electromagnetic forces in play, you can have certain plasma clouds reach their critical velocity and get ionized and form certain magnetic field structures, and then you can have collapse and aggregation and condensation from that. And Alvin talks about it all in this book here, right? Lays out why the gravitational collapse of a gas cloud literally makes no sense. I mean, it's not like gravity didn't do anything. There is, of course, gravitational processes occurring, but basically lays out how it makes no sense. Published, at least NASA is the one that, printed off the books, NASA SP 345, yet it's not at all acknowledged with the mainstream. You go to Wikipedia and you type in proto-nebular hypothesis, right? This is what pops up. The most widely accepted model in the field of cosmogony to explain the formation and evolution of the solar system suggests that the solar system is formed from gas and dust. Where's the plasma? Orbiting the sun, which clumped up together to form the planets. What about the satellites? What about the dozens and dozens of moons around Jupiter and around Saturn, Uranus, Neptune? We need a model that explains how they formed in a fractal manner to how the planets formed around the sun, because you can look at the satellites, the moons around Jupiter, for example, and you can look at their distributed densities in their orbits, and it comes up also non-homogeneous and very similar to the non-homogeneous distributed density nature of our solar system. So there's clearly some fractal process here at work, and if you incorporate the physics of plasma, it all of a sudden makes sense. And this was written about back in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. It's 2026 now, right? 1980, when the Hunt brothers cornered the silver market, was 46 freaking years ago now, right? I'm not even that old. thankfully. Not that anyone being 46 should be upset, but I'm just glad that I'm the age that I am. I got hopefully some years ahead of me. But 46 years, we've just basically been going backwards in many aspects. So why are they hiding this data? Like, why is this not being acknowledged, right? There's a lot of ideas. I think some of it's is ignorance. Not everyone knows everything. And there's so much stuff that obviously I haven't covered here that A, I don't know, and B, collectively, we don't know. What we don't know, we don't know. All that stuff. But there's more than that. There's more than just, people don't know. Like, these people are, they're running everything. If you're sending astronauts to the moon, you better have a good understanding of the space weather coming up. Why did they deorbit like half the astronauts on the space station just before this historic solar storm came in? They haven't said why. I understand you're keeping your health stuff private. Some people are speculating that a lady, one of the astronauts, was pregnant. I don't know. But, coincidental timing that right before this massive storm comes in, they take off half the crew. You have to leave some people up there, mostly Russians up there right now. So, yeah, that's everything effectively I wanted to talk about today. It summarized all the topics that were floating around my head. And I just really I hope I impressed upon you how there are a lot of things that exist and are real. And just because they are not acknowledged by the mainstream or official organizations, whatever, does not make them false and not true. Right? There's a lot of truth out there that's not acknowledged. So that is the presentation. We'll do a question and answer as well. But before we do that, I'd like to let you know that I have a website where I sell a variety of holistic wellness products and also merchandise. And my dad wanted me to do a promotion for you all today. He just had his surgery yesterday. It was just like an initial surgery for his heart, checking it out and everything. That all went well. So thank you for all your prayers for him for this time period. It's really been tremendous. We really felt it. It's been really, really amazing. Very grateful to all of you. But he's like, I want to pack up some orders, baby. So you better do a promotion today, Stefan. I'm like, all right, all right. So we have everything in stock. We've been preparing because I'm leaving for Sweden soon. He has more surgeries coming up for his heart. So we wanted to have everything in stock. We have it all in stock. The spirituality, the herb coffee, top sellers. These are really, really great. Each on their own. Spirituality helps open up your senses, connect to these more etheric energy fields. Often you can bring in information, downloads, aha moments, like pivotal dreams by drinking spirituality. And then herb coffee is really great to get focused, like in the zone, research, building neural connections. Like if you're interested in this stuff, you want to do your own research into it more, right? Just chase out that intuition string leading you somewhere. Then this is a great thing. If you have the morning set aside to do that, whatever, like have a cup of herb coffee. It's 50% coffee. It's also has lion's mane mushroom in there. So that's what builds those neurologic pathways, the new ones, and it's neuroplastic in nature. Chicory root, dandelion root. So it's half caffeine. So you can drink this a little bit later in the day and be fine, but it still has a little bit of that caffeine for that buzz to keep you focused. Right here, I'm wearing the Explore the Cosmos Within shirt. As you can see, fractal, sacred geometry design with the Fibonacci spiral on the front, cosmic pyramids on the back, comes in white and also in navy blue. I think it's called like mystic blue or something. Going all the way up to 4XL. This shirt is awesome. I love the feng shui to it, and that's available on the website. We also have our festivity. Everything's fully in stock. Our festivity is fully in stock. Our newest tea blend, basically our most flavorful tea blend. It's incredible, perfect for this time of year. When you got the snowstorm coming in, you got 2 feet of snow piled up. This is what you want in your cup to be drinking, because it's just like, it's like an amazing mulled tea. And it's zero caffeine. You can drink this at night. You can drink this in the morning. Super flavorful, but no sugar, no artificial natural flavors or anything like that. It's just herbs. It's apple, cranberry. Those two are not organic, but they have no additives or sugar or anything added to them. Then it's burdock root, licorice root, chamomile, allspice, cloves, cinnamon, and star anise. Those are all organic. Fantastic tea blend. Definitely recommend you honestly pick up like a bundle pack of this stuff. But go to earthevolution.com/store to check that out. It's linked in the video description. I highly recommend you do so. And with that, we will do a quick question and answer. And then I'm going to sign off. How exactly does space weather affect Earth weather? Thank you for the mention. Basic question, but foundational. So it really has to do, from my research, with how it affects the global electric circuit and how it really affects the charge of the uppermost part of the atmosphere, the ionosphere. Because you have the ionosphere at about 50 kilometers up on the daytime side, 100 kilometers up nighttime side, going all the way out to the exosphere, 1,000 kilometers out. It has a charge. It has an equipotential of 250,000 volts. That's 250 kilovolts. And as a result of that, you have this gradient that forms in between the ionosphere and the ground surface, because the ground surface has no charge. It's 0 volts. That's the electric potential. In between two electric potentials, you get a current. How strong is the current depends on the resistivity of the medium. The atmosphere in between is fairly resistive, very resistive. 7 orders of magnitude more resistive than the surface of the crust or the ionosphere. So as a result, it's a slow trickle of energy. When the ionosphere changes its electrical charge, that flow of energy alters. It influences any weather systems down near the surface in the troposphere, clouds, rain, snow, whatever, all that gets amplified. And as a result, that seems to be like the trigger mechanism for that. It's more than just that though. You also have like atmospheric gravity waves, and you have this relativistic particle flux coming in that causes ionization of deeper parts of the atmosphere closer to the surface because these particle cascades. It's a whole bunch of stuff. So to answer your question would really be probably like if I really went in depth, like a 2, 3, 4, 5 hour lecture. But yeah, in general, my observations in general, it just makes things more volatile. So if you had a rainstorm coming in and then you have a big geostorm, expect maybe, in fact, actually to be a thunderstorm, right? Or this snowstorm about to hit the United States, whatever their forecast is, probably add like 6 inches of snow on top of that. It's probably just gonna be stronger, longer, all these things than they forecast because they don't take space weather into account. Theory that civilization exists at the Kuiper Belt, that it is us, but in the future, I don't know. I can't manifest proof, but with all going on, figure I mention it. I was under the DOE 2 decades. Yeah, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. I've actually thought about this for a while. Let me pull up our solar system scope one more time, just so we can kind of zoom out and really see the solar system here. All right. And here it is. So what's happening? There we go. So, I mean, we have, of course, the inner planets. We're on Earth. We landed some probes on Venus, Mercury, Mars. We have Juno orbiting around Jupiter. We've done some orbits around Saturn. We've only done a flyby of Uranus and Neptune once, okay? So the moment you get, and we've done one flyby of Pluto, the moment you get to 20 astronomical units, we don't know anything. And there are not just hundreds of objects, there are tens and tens, hundreds of thousands of objects outside the orbit of Neptune in the Kuiper Belt. You have uncountable number of trans-Neptunian dwarf objects, things like Sedna and Eris, which are big, like 1,000 kilometers in diameter. But imagine even just an object 200 kilometers in diameter. You build a space base on there. We would never know. We would never know. It's dark, it's dim for us. We can't see it, right? Slow moving. And for example, if you did have these ancient civilizations out here, for example, we see a Neptune-Uranus opposition. This is 2083, right? It's going to be difficult to travel from this side over to this side if you wanted to, right? Because these civilizations, if they exist, are probably more interconnected than we think they are, or would think they are, right? But if you have an alignment like this, let's go back to the 40s. roughly right here. Look at this. You have this nice ability, and actually I go forward a little bit further. You have this nice ability here to kind of move from Uranus to Saturn to Jupiter and then fling over to Neptune if you want. So there's going to be certain planetary geometries, or like again right here. Look at that nice line, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, where you could officially move across the solar system at the right time. I think that's probably when we would see more activity, perhaps, if these civilizations exist, than periods of time like oppositions, where they're far apart. So these are just ideas, but you know, there's something to it for sure. At least we should be thinking about that. We shouldn't be completely like, oh, we know for sure that there's nothing out there. We're totally good. Who's to say we are? We're good so far. Check out the Osiris Connection on Outside Minds podcast, Book of Revelation 2. They saw this coming. Shahail 44. Thank you, Quantum Gospel, for the super thanks. And anyone that wants to check that out, they can do that. Simple junk silver conversion is $140 equals $1.40 equals 1 silver ounce. Yeah, that doesn't sound right. Junk silver is 90% silver. And right now it's $100 per ounce. So you're getting for a 1 ounce junk silver coin, you know, let's say that exists, that's $90. Thank you for making this information easy to understand. You have changed how I view my life. You're quite welcome. Thanks, Mike, for the other super thanks. 3i Atlas has a consciousness and is not a comet. It's some kind of vessel observing the galaxy. We aren't the main reason for visiting our solar system. Thank you, Shannon, for the super thanks. For the intriguing idea. I totally believe the consciousness angle, why it's here, what it's doing, all these are open questions, but I think that's more in line with what actually is occurring than it's just a comet. But that's just me. Jay Hassar, would the planets and their alignments work like a clock in some sense, where specific alignments act as an event trigger points based on their positions? What would cause $600 silver to manifest? Yeah, that's how I look at it. I really do see this as like when the hand strikes 12, you know it's midnight, right? That they just converge. When the hand's at 11:55, it's 11:55, and that has a unique energy compared to midnight. No one's cheering Happy New Year's at 11:55. At midnight, they are, depending on what time what day of the year it is. So these things matter. There are these waves and rhythms and ripples to our culture, our society, our civilization, right? How we interact with each other, all these things, the energy. It's a morphic resonance pattern. It's a holographic universe. So what would cause $600 silver to manifest? Honestly, what's happening right now? I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised, because this pattern here, just in general, when you learn about this stuff, again, not financial advisor, just a smart guy, okay? But this pattern right here is like 50 years in length, going back to 1980, 1979 really, going 2026, nearly 50 years. The bigger the pattern, the bigger the movement, because it's talking about a macro economic story across 50 plus years, going all the way back to the 70s when we got taken off the gold standard, right? Nixon took us off the convertibility, the last little bit of that taken off in 73. Then we had this massive uptick. Then we've been in this basing pattern because they kept the price suppressed, unnaturally so. But even then, we still form this higher high here versus there, right? This higher low, because we spiked up, went back to a similar level in 2011. Though inflation adjusted, we're still below both of these peaks. Though we're getting close to 2011 right now. And perhaps we look at that chart. So that's kind of the key. Adjusted for inflation, macro trends. Let's type this guy in. I think this is the one that'll give it to us. Yeah, here we go. Adjusted for inflation. We are getting very close to the adjusted for inflation price in 2010. In 1980 was unnatural because of how much it really went up. But we are getting close to that right now. And that price was $145.89. If we break out of this pattern, then we're probably just going, who knows? But if we're talking about the complete collapse of the economic system and a new establishment of something else that actually serves people, right? Because right now, I mean, people are working 3 jobs, they can't make ends meet, they're being taxed to death. I mean, it's crazy. So, I mean, this is speaking to something big. All these activations also connected to the birth of money, the birth of the Roman denarius, right? The collapse of the Roman Empire. This, and then 3 hits in 46 years. This is like, what's happening now is historic. And it's just getting started, in my opinion. But who knows? Awesome job connecting silver markets to planetary alignments. As a silver investor, I never thought about this before. Great show. You are quite welcome. Yeah, we look at everything here. And this is something that I've been picking up on now for quite a while, and I've been presenting on it. Thank you, Geraldine, for the very generous super thanks. And Zakin, I think he's saying that he's a whistleblower, silenced 2 times, lost his license in 2003. Started noticing changes in behavior around 2020. I have proof that this is happening. I need to reach someone like Dr. Michael Yeadon. I hope you can find the people that you need to reach. But yeah, I mean, this is not uncommon that people come out and share this stuff and then they get silenced in whatever industry or what. If a planet collided and busted up, could it create other planets? Yeah, it could. That's the idea, at least of Hans Alvin, is that what happens is you have this plasma and dust, you know, in this protoplanetary stage that we were talking about. I'm not sure which graphic I have for that. It was somewhere in here. Either way, you have this when you have this protoplanetary disk of the gas and dust, it becomes plasma, right? And then it forms these regions because it gets stuck to the magnetic field. And because of that, you can start to have this condensation of more rarefied materials, and they can start to condense out, form bigger grains, which then form these what he called embryos, and the embryos interact and form planetesimals. What happens also is you have all these little things flying through space with erratic orbits. Well, when they hit each other, some of those collisions will be what's called inelastic, where the relative velocity is actually separate from each other, right? The relative velocity is actually pretty low. So rather than going like this and going apart, they actually start to become more self-similar with their orbits across time because they hit each other, and then now they reduce their relative velocity and their inclination and eccentricity. And so what happens is you have all these erratic orbits start to coalesce into what he calls jet streams. And we have tons of observational evidence of that with comets and more, where they form these jet streams. So a whole bunch of particles that will get hit by, right? 1833, the great comet storm, meteor storm of 1833 is a great example. So in jet streams, once the relative velocity and cross section of these things is very, very low, they can actually start to clump together via electrostatic forces, and even like minor impacts they can fuse together. Now you can start to have bigger building blocks, and the same process unfolds across larger time frames and larger scales, and that's how you can get planetesimals to form. And according to Alvin, because the distributed density of the asteroid belt was much lower than the inner zone and the outer zone, that's not the remnants of an exploded planet, because the mass of that planet actually would be almost nothing. 80% of the asteroid belt's mass is already in Ceres. And the mass of Ceres is like 0.0, it's like 1% that of the moon or something like that. It's incredibly low of the moon, right? But if it had a very low distributed density, this process of this hedogonic process of development would take much longer to unfold than it would in higher density zones. So his hypothesis / theory is that the asteroid belt is just a part of the solar system that's still undergoing its evolution, just at a much shorter time frame. But yeah, if a planet busted up, if it was able to refocus into a jet stream, it could theoretically, according to Alvin, over millions and millions and millions of years, fuse back together again into a completely new thing. Jen Williams, I just ordered 4 different teas. Thank you so much, Stefan. I can't wait for tea time. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoy them. We'll send them out to you as soon as we can. We usually ship in a day or two, so that's awesome. Awesome episode from JJD90. Thank you so much. Thank you for the super thanks. And Leonard, thank you for the super thanks as well. Schaefer's, thank you as well. And Miss Kelly DeSantis, what is your opinion on simulation theory? Well, I think it's interesting. The one thing about simulation theory is it's often used as like a cop-out for free will, or everything's programmed and destined to occur. And I'm just not the biggest fan of that. And I don't think we need a simulation to explain this. I think the simulation, there's something to it, but the people that really talk about simulation theory are the ones that are the most materialistic and technologically driven, and they want to upload your brain to a computer, and they want robots in your house, and they want universal tracking, and they want AI to take over everything. So that's like red flag after red flag. So I'm just, if it's just a line of thinking and thought process. It's not holistic or metaphysical in nature. And, who knows who's right or wrong? It's probably all the things and more. But I'm just not, it just doesn't resonate with me. So that's what I can say. If it doesn't resonate with me, I don't really think it's probably what it is. But new data comes out, then I'll change my mind. But I don't think we need a simulation to explain the majesty of God. That's really what it is. It's like they're so disassociated from God that they think that it's some alien with a computer, because they're looking at a computer all day and that's all they can think about. And they haven't hugged a tree in a while. So I don't know. But those are my thoughts and opinions. So yeah. That is everything I wanted to discuss today. I hope you found all that information useful. Again, there is a whole bunch of holistic wellness products and merchandise on my website, earthevolution.com/store. You can check that out right here. And I recommend, if you like, to learn a little bit more about silver by watching this video. I go really in depth on those astrological transits with that one there. So I'll keep you up to date regardless. Thank you all so much for watching. Wishing each and every single one of you well. Please take care of yourselves. Again, I've been your host, Stefan Burns. I'll see you all in the next video.